DEI might be dying. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Everybody, welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. I mentioned in the opening DEI. A lot of people might not know what that meant. After I said it, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has come into vogue in the last couple of years, particularly after the Black Lives Movement and some efforts where corporations were trying to address the needs of their internal employees. And we had done a story about a conservative guy named Mr. Starbuck who went after Tractor Supply, and this week we've got a couple of other companies that seem to be falling prey to this DEI movement in terms of conservatives wanting it eliminated. So we're going to talk about that in Shop Talk. So I just wanted to clarify what DEI was. So Mr. Nash, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. And getting ready for the new week. And I had a couple things to share. Entertainment news on TFG Unbuttoned, our companion podcast. We talked about some of the other stuff that happened over the weekend that was large and explosive headlines. But I have two documentary recommendations for you. The first comes to us from our friend Lauren at Deep Discount, who will be visiting with them later in the show. HBO is now airing a documentary on Faye Dunaway. And I have to tell you, Bob and I really enjoyed it a great deal. She recommended it. And we're like halfway through the documentary, maybe an hour in, and Bob goes, "They better talk about her in Mommy Dear, in Mommy Dearest," and they did. And she had some interesting things to say about that role and about the direction, and just it's just a really. I didn't realize how many movies she was in, the diversity of roles that she's played. So I highly recommend that. And then another one that just sort of popped onto my radar was, I think it might have been on Gizmodo, or I forget what blog I was reading, but there's a documentary on Netflix called Tickled. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so the documentarian, the guy that did this, came across videos one day online where people were like tied up and they were tickled with feathers, and he discovered that there's an entire...
So it's a fetish?
Yes. He discovered that there's an entire world of videos. There's this entire tickling world, and he started to investigate it, and it got kind of fascinating really quickly because there's some really unsavory players in the space, and there's this weird, especially when it's men tickling men, there's this kind of homoerotic overtone to it, but they don't say that, Anyway, I just recommend Tickled on Netflix.
Where are they tickling? Are they tickling their feet or something, or what?
Feet, chest, armpits, arms, stomach.
Are they nude?
No. Well, I guess they could be, but the ones that they showed in this documentary were clothed. At least they had a pair of shorts on or something. But Bob and I sat through this and we're like, wow, this is kind of sick. Because there was one kingpin of the tickling empire who, if you came after him...
I can't even take it seriously.
I know. It doesn't sound...
The tickling empire.
The tickling empire, yeah.
How did I miss this?
Oh, I missed it completely. Well, here's the thing. It was just added to Netflix about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The movie itself, the documentary, was produced, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. So the movie's not necessarily new, or the documentary, but its addition to Netflix is, and obviously that opens the door for a lot of people to see this thing. It's interesting. A lot of lives were changed by this. People who participated.
Is it just one episode, sort of? It's just one show. It's not a series.
There was a second documentary that was made, but the only one that I saw on Netflix is called Tickled, and it's just a one-shot deal. Like it's a 80-minute.
And is the Faye Dunaway just a one and done? It's
yes,
not a series.
It's a documentary. It's not a series.
Because I turned it on and I got distracted. I forget what happened, and then I didn't go back to it. And I was wondering, Did they address where Betty Davis says she was horrible to work with? Did they do any of that?
They showed that. They showed a lot of actually other actors and actresses and producers and directors talking about Faye, mostly in the way of difficult but exceptionally talented, and really the outcome is always great.
Was it funny or just informative?
Oh, there were funny moments, and there were definitely some interesting things. I didn't know she had a son. And the son is a really great guy, and he plays a bit of a role in the movie because he's going through photos with her and stuff like that. But we started as well, and then we stopped just because it was late, and then we picked it up again and watched it all the way through. But really, really well done.
Yeah, I'll have to watch it. There's another. I tried watching The Bear. You see The Bear has gotten all of this accolades for
FX Network. It's the second series now or something.
Yeah. And I watched a couple of episodes, and I'll have to give it another try. People love it, and it's gotten great acclaim. And what's the?
I just read an article this morning. It might have been in Variety, and the author, it was an opinion piece, and someone said, "The Bear is not a good show. Let's finally admit it now." I have no idea what the guy's talking about because I've never watched it. But his whole thesis was like, no, this was an interesting take, and there were some interesting moments, but it's really not a well done show, and you don't. And
it's oddly produced in terms of the camera. I just think it's got some
handheld stuff, or
and he's a chef, and he inherits an old kind of beef sandwich shop in Chicago.
It was a family restaurant or something, right?
And it's called a comedy. It's listed as a comedy. Everybody says it is not a comedy. But anyway, I didn't know if you had given it a try. I'm sure Lauren has watched it, our friend at Deep Discount.
I think she liked it. She might correct me on that. But most people I know who see it love it. But when I came across this one article, the guy's like, hey, let's be real. This is not the best show in the world. I was surprised because it's counter to the entire, theme of what we've been hearing about that show.
Did you ever pick up again? This will be the last we talk about TV, I guess. Did you ever pick up again on Breaking Bad, or did you leave that alone?
No. When I return to it, I'm going to return with a gusto and commit to watching at least through season 2, because I've been told that if I get through the first 3 or 4 episodes of season 1, sky's the limit. So I have to commit to that.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking of watching it again. That's how much I liked it, which is odd for me. Yeah. So.
But I'll tell you this, you know what we turn to almost every single day, and I comment on this all the time. I'm amazed about it. I Love Lucy.
Oh, I Love Lucy. Okay.
The other night, we saw an episode where the owner of the Copa doesn't want to give Ricky a raise, and he accepts Ricky's resignation, and then Ethel, Fred, and Lucy call to reserve the club. They fill up every table with fake reservations, and then they have a quick change trunk out back, and they come in
from the old burlesque days. The old
and they all come in as
days.
different characters. Oh, is Ricky Ricardo playing? But Bob and I said at dinner last night, so far we know these episodes. We've watched them since we were kids, and I still find them hilarious. I still laugh, and I still think it's really perfectly done TV. But
there were 2 lines. There was somebody had posted something online, and I laughed about some of your favorite Lucy lines, and there are a lot of. We used to use them in our imaging when we were over on Sirius XM. Some of them, but I still love the one where she in the freezer where she has to try to hide the beef, and so she's trying to tell Ethel to keep ask Ricky to sing or do something. Well, I don't know if he will. She says, "Listen, you take care of the ham, I'll take care of the beef." So, but and I just busted up laughing because it's still funny, right? I mean,
it's still funny. Yeah.
So, what caught your eye this week, Mr. Nash?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Duct Tape caught my eye this week, and it caught my eye in a really weird way because I didn't know they did this. This is all news to me, but here it is, folks. I'm going to give you the headline. Two teens, show-stopping prom outfits made only from duct tape score them $15,000 in scholarships. So the company that does duct tape, which is Sure Tape Technologies, they apparently run all these kind of contests of things you can do with duct tape. So 2 high school students created. They live in different parts of the country, but they created prom outfits completely and entirely from duct tape.
My
Monica
gosh.
Walsh and Isaac Cervantes were announced as the 2024 Duck Brand Stuck at Prom Scholarship Contest recipients after spending countless hours putting together a tuxedo for Isaac Cervantes and a dress for Monica Walsh. Walsh is from Dryden, Ontario, and she made a colorful prom dress, winning the title Grand Prize Dress, while Cervantes, who's from Pilot Point, Texas, made a blue tux, which earned him the title Grand Prize Tux. For winning the top prize, both 18-year-olds were given $15,000 in scholarship money. Now, here's something I'm confused by. For winning the prize, both 18-year-olds were given 15. So they each got 15, or did they have to split the 15? Well, I don't know if it matters, but I think they should each get 15. Walsh just graduated from high school, said it took her 126 hours to make her prom dress out of 13 rolls of duck brand tape. She's never used it before, but she had a fun time doing it. And Cervantes took many hours to make his. He says, it's very hard to tell you how many hours it took me to make this. A majority of the time was spread out. He explained, adding that he would work on his attire every Sunday with his mom by his side, which is really great. But have you ever seen anything like this before? We know about duct tape, right?
Yeah, no, back in the day in Philly, I'd go to the clubs, and women, the big thing then, they'd use the New York Times and they would make dresses, but essentially it was they would belt paper around them,
Yeah.
But I wondered if this, as I'm looking at the pictures, because particularly the women's dress is very intricate, and I'm thinking,
Oh my God. Yeah.
did they just take a dress and put tape over it, or
No,
is it
they
all
created
tape?
It's all tape. It's all
Wow,
tape.
because
Yeah.
even that tuxedo kind of, it looks like it's Mexican heritage, but
Uh-huh.
that is very intricate and detailed, and does not look like that would be easy.
No, and by the way, it goes without saying that I can't imagine it's comfortable to wear a duct tape
No,
garment.
so you start sweating.
Fits in like crazy, yeah.
I guess you could bring a piece of, bring a roll with you in case it rips. You just tape yourself back up.
They were both inspired by backgrounds and their love of art, but Carrie Howe, who's the director of product marketing at SureTape, told the news service that this year's competition offered the biggest prize yet. With larger cash scholarships and new categories to win in, we're ensuring talented teens have more opportunities than ever before to be rewarded for their creativity, inspirational stories, and fashion-forward style. This just, to me, it's like I've never heard of a duct tape contest like this. Maybe I guess we're just out of that zone, right?
Well, how they heard about it, right? And then the other
Yeah.
one is maybe they should do one for business and do a business casual outfit, right?
This
You can see.
almost sounds like a Paris is Burning kind of thing. Like if you had the ballroom, the walkers, and they come in. Remember like
Project Runway, right?
Yeah.
Too. I mean, it could be a Project Runway thing.
Perfect.
You've
Because
got
the Project
tape.
Runway did stuff with recycled materials, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but from the pictures you show, they look
Colorful.
fantastic.
Yeah, well done.
So.
Good work, kids.
Mine can't be any different. I saw this
Naturally.
headline. It came from our friends at what was transpiring in Milwaukee last week at the Republican National Convention. So the headline is Subway Worker Denies Conservative Christians Service because of their outrageous T-shirts. And John posts a picture of the worker there, which God bless her. So she was a Subway employee. So many of you know the Subway chain where they make Subway sandwiches, or some people call them grinders or hoagies or whatever you call them.
Depends on part of the country you're
Depends
in.
on where you live. But so it was a Subway franchise out in Milwaukee, right outside the convention center where the Republican convention was going on. 4 men came in, conservative Christian men that were attending the event, of course, came in with T-shirts. And one of the T-shirts said, and she said they were written loudly and boldly. One T-shirt's message was, abortion is murder. The other one was, homo sex is sin, Romans, number 1. The other T-shirt said, repent, with a burn in hell picture. And the 4th T-shirt was, Planned Parenthood murders children and rapes mothers. So they come walking in, and they come to order their little Subway sandwiches. And there was a person in front that she was making a sandwich for, and she looked up and she read these T-shirts. So she just ignored them. And they said that they were very hungry and they were looking to eat. And she says, I'm not going to serve you. And so one of the guys said, "Wait a minute, you're refusing to serve us?" And took out his phone and started videotaping this. And the other preacher, these were preachers, said, "What are you talking about? We're hungry. We have to go." And so then the other one's like, "Well, maybe we'll have to go somewhere else." He's like, "No, no, no. This is religious persecution. This is they can't refuse us service." And the woman making the sandwiches, she's just listening. And he wants to get her on tape as he records. Says, "Why are you refusing service to us?" She goes, "It's a personal matter." So, and he said, "Is it because of our T-shirts?" And she just looked at him very deadpan and said, "Yes." So they threatened they were going to call Subway Corporation. They're going to hear about this. This is going to be a boycott. So there's all this outrage now that how they were denied service at the Subway in Milwaukee because of their T-shirts and what their T-shirts said. And so I laughed and I thought, this is certainly a dose of their own medicine, right? These
the
groups
bakery stuff, right?
Right. We're not going to make cakes. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. So I just laughed about it. And I thought, well, she had, restaurants can refuse service to people. So I actually looked to see what the actual law was, because they're claiming now that they were, this group that wore the T-shirts had, when somebody did some more research on them, they have a history of being, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? In your face? I don't know. Confrontational. That's the word, John. Thank you. They were recorded recently disrupting a children's story hour at a library to yell about transgender people and yelling at kids at the mall that Santa Claus isn't real. So
this is good. Yeah.
So
they're from. She nailed them.
Oh yeah, they're from Texas,
Oh.
and they're part of a Texas-based hate-mongering group. They said, and their purpose is to antagonize anyone that doesn't agree with their spiritual beliefs. And they go about with these T-shirts with spiteful slogans. So I wondered whether you could refuse service to somebody at a restaurant. They said federal law in the United States indeed says businesses have a right to refuse service to anyone. Here's the catch. They can refuse service unless the company is discriminating against a particular class under federal, state, or local law. And so this is where does religious freedom come in here in terms of being an offense? And in other words, if you're against a woman's right to choose versus abortion is murder, how far do you, if your T-shirt just said, "I'm against a woman's right to choose" versus abortion is murder.
Where's the line?
Where's the line? But I just laughed and smiled because I thought, this young, she looks, typical activist. If I'm stereotyping, right, John? If you look at her picture, you could just know she was not going to have it. And so I thought it was quite funny. But a little dose of their own medicine, right?
Oh, it's so typical, Tim. Do as I say, not as I do, right? So they can do everything they could, but the minute there's pushback. And as you were talking about this, I'm going back to History 101 in college and our history in high school about the founding of the country, and the original settlers were fleeing religious persecution. And so here we are having all this crap going on, and it's religiously driven when we were supposed to be a society where when you met on the town green, it didn't matter what house of worship you went to. You were there to solve community problems, and it wasn't supposed to be infected with your spiritual beliefs or your religious doctrine.
Right.
It's just... but that's a different... Right. That's the perfect world, not the one we live in, right?
Well, I wondered about it because, you see foul T-shirts. I mean, I love those guys that go around to the Trump rallies and the people that have FUCK Biden. Mm-hmm. And then they're talking about kids, and kids shouldn't be exposed to things. And there's a guy standing there with his, FUCK Biden shirt on, and they're talking to him about transgender people and drag queens and all this, and how it's bad for their kids to see that. And then I love how the interviewer goes, "What's your shirt say, by the way?" Oh, well, you just told me. Is it okay for your kids to see that? So. Yeah,
there was one picture I love. There was a meme about grooming, and it was this father posing with his two kids. They all had rifles, and behind them were these girls with enormous breasts and flags, and the things like grooming anybody. I mean, like, it's do as I say, not as I do. It's what I approve of, not what you do. Crazy.
So, So, hey, as John mentioned earlier, friends of ours here on the focus group, deep discount. They've been with us for quite a while. You can find them by going to focusgroupradio.com, click on the deep discount logo, and start shopping away. Right now, they've got a number of sales going on, but in particular this week, the name says it all, and you can save up to 60% on films and shows aptly named for the lead. So, Mr. Nash, what did you pick this week?
One of my favorite sales, I had a couple I picked, but I ended up going with one I have not seen, and I love this actor, and so I definitely want to see the movie, and I'm picking it up. It's called Remembering Gene Wilder, and I think it just came out in 2023, and it's a documentary about Gene Wilder, a loving tribute to him. The relationship he had with Mel Brooks, because he starred in The Producers, Blazing Saddles. I mean, the list goes on with comedy. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He worked with Richard Pryor on Silver Streak. They did a couple movies together. So I'm excited about it because I love Gene Wilder. I really do. And I also found a couple of interesting fun facts about him. Collaborated most frequently with Mel Brooks. Producers, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein. How could I forget Young Frankenstein?
Yes.
Many consider his portrayal in that movie to be one of his best comedic turns, and I tend to agree. It was a brilliant movie. He received 2 Academy Awards, Best Supporting Actor for his role in The Producers and Best Adapted Screenplay. I didn't realize he was one of the writing people for Young Frankenstein. He won a Primetime Emmy Award. And do you remember when he showed up on Will and Grace by any chance? He played Mr. Stein, a lawyer and love interest for Karen Walker, a crazy Karen. Earned him critical acclaim and recognition. He had a very huge fear of flying.
Really?
It says that due to a traumatic experience on a flight, Wilder developed a fear of flying and preferred to travel by other means. So I'm wondering if he had a premiere in London, did he take the Queen Mary over?
Queen Mary. He and Aretha.
Across, yeah. And finally, he was an accomplished pianist. I did not know that. So he actually played the piano in some of his films. So, you and I have a thing about the piano. I think anybody who could play, it's amazing. So there you go. So I picked Remembering Gene Wilder on Blu-ray 1906, and it's a documentary.
That's a good one. I had picked a movie that I think I mentioned before. We've at least talked about.
You'd love it, yeah.
It's the book originally written by Stephen King, but the movie's Misery, and the director was Rob Reiner. Stars James Caan and Kathy Bates, and I'll read the description, then I'll say something and make a laugh about it. It's a terrifying psychological thriller that won the Academy Award for its iconic bone-shattering performance by Kathy Bates. After his car crashes in the mountains during a blinding snowstorm, famous novelist Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, is rescued from the car crash by Annie Wilkes, who's Kathy Bates. And then she's obsessed with the main character in one of his novels and gets upset, and then she is very maniacal in terms of her keeping him tied up and hobbled, essentially, in a bed in the house. And I thought, this Stephen King's got quite a mind. I mean, when you think of all his different movies, a little sick mind of his, because when you watch that, and she's got that sledgehammer.
The hobbling.
And she's so like, I wish you hadn't have done that. Here we go.
Yeah, and that hobbling carries the very end of the movie. He is walking with a cane. He's talking to his publisher. I mean, she basically damages him for life. Yeah. I think Misery is absolutely top of my list. So it's Dolores Claiborne is a Stephen King. Yeah. Misery is another one. The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken. The Shining. Like there's a lot of Stephen King books that don't necessarily
Carrie, The Stand.
But these in particular don't rely on murder or blood or horror. It's psychological and it's crazy, right?
Yeah. So it's so anyway, I always it's one of those where if I ever come across it somewhere, I'll watch it. And she just Kathy Bates gives an obviously
somehow the
Academy
hobbling in
Award
4K Ultra HD probably looks even more horrific, right?
Well, they have that, and then you can also get it. So that's for $27, and for under $20, you can get a regular Blu-ray, which is a collector's edition, which has a bunch of additional commentary and features to it. So, but you'll get all that at deep discount. So what was the release this week, Mr. Nash?
We have a new release called Back to Black, and I've heard a lot about this movie. This is about Amy Winehouse, and she's portrayed in this film by Marissa Abella. and it chronicles her rise to fame from her early days in Camden through the making of her groundbreaking album Back to Black that catapulted Amy Winehouse to global fame. It's told through her eyes and inspired by her deeply personal lyrics. The film explores and embraces the many layers of the iconic artist and the tumultuous love story at the center of one of the most legendary albums of all time. I'm curious about this because I don't know a lot about Amy Winehouse, but I always like movies about artists and about the process,
Right.
like how they get to what they do. So I'm sure there's a lot of fictional elements to it, but there's a lot of biopic elements as well. So that's available from deep discount on Blu-ray for $22.99. So recapping, folks, we have one of our favorite sales, and that is The Name Is It Says It All. So the name of the movie is in the title, or a name's in the title. I picked Remembering Gene Wilder, documentary on Blu-ray, available for $19.06. Tim picked one of our all-time favorites, Misery, starring Kathy Bates, available 4K Ultra HD, $27.44, or you could get the Blu-ray, which is under $20. And Back to Black, a new documentary about, new fictional film about Amy Winehouse, and that's available for $22.99. So you get to deep discount by going to our site, focusgroupradio.com, clicking on the deep discount logo, and start your shopping experience. We are going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, we have a business birthday and shop talk, so stay with us.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Tim Bennett here with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. We are the Focus Group. Be sure to catch us here on Wednesdays at 1 with an audio release on Saturdays and Saturday mornings. But you can find all of our media housed at focusgroupradio.com, including our podcast, which is TFGN Button, which is released on Tuesdays. I sound like Lucy. You mentioned Lucy earlier. It's the Wednesday afternoon Fine Arts League that meets on Thursday because everyone was busy Wednesday.
Yeah, that's right.
So, without further ado, Mr. Nash, our business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
This was, and I don't remember, we've been doing these business birthdays for probably 15 years now, John. And usually
This is a new one.
Usually there's plenty of source material. And for some reason, this was one of the toughest weeks I've had in a long time to find something or find one we haven't done. And I had to go all the way to Saturday. So actually it would be July 27th would be the birthday, but it's Saturday with our audio when most people listen. But born July 27th, 1831, he died at 56 in 1888, is Ludvig Nobel, or Nobel. And he was a Swedish-Russian engineer and a noted businessman and humanitarian. In fact, at the time, he was one of the top wealthiest people in the world. So he came from an engineering family. Of course, the Nobel Peace Prize. His father had invented plywood. His brother invented dynamite.
Seriously? Plywood.
Yeah,
Interesting.
plywood. His brother invented dynamite, and also it's what the Alfred Nobel is what the Nobel Prize is named after. And so he was, as I said, an engineer, and his father had left him a company that it was doing machine work. It was like a machine shop. And what ended up happening is he decided he was going to try to grow the business and make additional parts or try to figure out this machine building and modernize it, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so he worked in the factory for a number of years and started developing gun carriages for Russia. So he sent his brother. So they were running this factory in St. Petersburg. They were now supplying armaments to the Russians. And he obtained a large contract from the Russian government in the late 1800s to make rifles, but they didn't have any wood. So he sent his oldest brother, Robert Nobel, to go out into the Russian forest or whatever and make these deals in the Caucasus region to buy all this wood for these rifles. So he gave the brother 25,000 rubles at the time and sent him out to go buy what they called walnut money because they needed walnut wood for these guns. And the brother instead took the money and bought a refinery, an oil refinery, in what's now known as Azerbaijan. And so he says back to his brother, he says, I didn't get the wood, but I bought an oil refinery. The brother says, we need wood to make these guns. So they end up deciding, well, let's modernize this oil refinery. And up until that time, I didn't realize this. The United States was actually teaching the Russians all about oil and exploration and the oil business.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
So when these guys, the Nobles, came to decide that they were going to take over this small refinery business that the Russians were struggling with, they had implemented all kinds of rules and all kinds of processes that they had borrowed from the United States. So they said really that the roles were reversed. So had it not been for the United States starting the technology and then these guys from Sweden picking up on it and teaching the Russians, that Russia probably would not be the oil producer that it is today even. So once they started figuring out how to refine the oil and pump the oil out of the ground, they didn't know what to do with it to transport it. So that's how he invented oil tankers. And so that's how the oil tanker was developed, was to try to move this oil from Azerbaijan around the world to these as the Industrial Revolution was starting to get oil. And it was very successful, and I didn't realize this. It goes into all the detail about how difficult it is to transport oil in bulk based on fires and smell and fume and all this other issue. But the oil tankers he designed were so successful, the rest of the world started copying them, and he wanted no patent money. He wanted no money at all. He just thought it was good for the world to have a safe way for transporting oil.
Wow.
So the other one quick thing about him is he was a very much a strong humanitarian. They said he introduced profit sharing, one of the first companies to introduce profit sharing to his companies. He always worked actively to improve the conditions in his factories. This is the oil refineries. He opened a nearby bank for people to save, to teach them how to manage funds. He created a lot of social programs, also provided things like dining rooms, food, billiard rooms, libraries, conference rooms, schools, hospitals in the communities where he would build these refineries, and to make sure that the people and the workers were well taken care of. So that's Ludvig Nobel. Died young at 56. But was one of the wealthiest men in the world, and the family's still quite wealthy.
Amazing. So the brother was Adolf?
The brother was Alfred.
Alfred, and he is the founder of the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
Right.
Okay.
And their father invented plywood. The brother Alfred did the dynamite, and also there were 5 of them, 5 brothers.
Jeez.
But
and all clever. I mean, like when you think about it, plywood, like it's taken for granted today. We use it in everything. It's just wow.
Well, and oil tankers, just as transporting of oil. They talked about how when they used to try to transport oil, they would always catch on fire.
Oh yeah,
the ships because of the
super dangerous, right?
Yeah. So, happy birthday, Mr. Nobel. Is it Nobel or Noble?
I always say the Nobel, Pete, like
Nobel
the Nobel
Prize. I do too.
Yeah.
So,
like a long O, Nobel, right?
Nobel. So as we talked earlier in the show, we have a story here that we found about DEI initiatives, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And John initially found it. We had talked last week about, I believe, it was Tractor Supply.
Tractor Supply, yeah.
And John found a story about John Deere, and as I was reading it, it popped up that there was also Microsoft popped into the news, and then a couple of other companies. So there's been a lot in the news lately about DEI programs and whether they are dying or they've seen their time. And in this particular article, they talk about John Deere being boycotted or being called out by this. Is it Robbie Starshak?
Yeah, Robbie Starbuck.
Robbie Starbuck. I keep saying Starshak. I don't know why. Robbie Starbuck. And
aren't you thinking of Welcome Back, Kotter?
Well, and we had a Robbie Starshak I went to school with at when I was younger. So
Oh,
that's
wait.
probably
Welcome
where
Back,
that's-
Cotter was Horse Shack, but close
That's
enough.
Horse Shack,
Okay.
yeah. No, Star Shacks used to sell the corn in Southbury. So I went to school. Then they went off to private schools. Good-
Tim, that's
corn
like
business
such
is
a
good.
it's a great reference. I know what you're talking about. They had
Corn
good corn.
business
Yeah.
is good. Oh yeah. So they talked about how Microsoft has laid off its DEI team. They said now Microsoft kind of came back and said no, that's not true. We've had some duplicate. We had hired a bunch of people during the pandemic, and we had some people that were doing the same jobs, and we're just culling the force. But there was an internal memo that leaked and said, well, they essentially got rid of the entire DEI team. But as they said that, they actually left out the E. So that's the other thing now that's going on, is it's just becoming D and I, and people are taking the E out because they don't quite understand what the E is in terms of equity, which I had looked at and I was trying to read to see if I understood what the equity was. They said equity differs from equality in a subtle but important way. While equality assumes that all people should be treated the same, equity takes into consideration a person's unique circumstances, adjusting treatment accordingly to the end result.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what that means.
But
still.
but the article, Tim, noted that it was the shifting definition and a lot of like gray area around equity that causes a lot of problems, because a human resources company might call equity one thing where a corporation might define it differently. So that was a bit of a murky area.
Right. And then as it pertained to John Deere, they listed the things that they were no longer going to participate in, similar to what Tractor Supply did, right, when they sent out that long memo. I didn't quite understand the purpose for that when Tractor Supply did it, and I certainly don't understand why John Deere did it. But some of the things where this was what was sent out to the employees from John Deere. We will no longer participate in or support external social or cultural awareness parades, festivals, or events. So so obviously that means you're not going to go to a gay pride, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But does that also mean you're not going to recognize Juneteenth now, which is a federal holiday?
Or let's be even more mundane. How about like Greek Orthodox Easter, or pick any
Right.
festival or parade, right? So they're basically just not going to do any of that. Period. Which I think it's signal virtuing for basically walking away from LGBTQ, but that's my own thing.
Right. And it's shrouded in right.
Yeah.
It's like when they say they don't want you to fly the pride flag, so they won't let you fly any flag.
Right.
But it's really because they don't want the pride flag. And then it says business resource groups will exclusively be focused on professional development, networking, mentoring, supporting talent recruitment efforts. Well, I thought that's what business resource groups were anyway. As I read through all this about what they weren't going to do and how there were changes and the importance of diversity and inclusion, whether it's Microsoft, John Deere, Tractor Supply we mentioned before, there's reference in here to Google, to Starbucks, I believe is mentioned in here.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, as I was reading all this, isn't this always been the job of the human resources departments at these major corporations to make sure that they're hiring a workforce that's compatible and inclusive and responsive to the needs of the organization and all the other things?
A and B, are they getting the best talent?
Yeah.
And the only way to get the best talent is if you offer an environment. So I think your point about the John Deere, the concessions they claim to be making, is fascinating because, the business resource group thing in particular. So let's say you have there's ERG or BRG, employee
Right.
resource group, I think they're the same thing. Let's say you have an LGBTQ business resource group in your company. Well, that resource group was always meant to be focused on development, networking, and mentoring to get you to a higher level. What's changed?
Right.
Maybe they just don't call it that. I mean, it's. I just think this to me. Unfortunately, I think for many, many years, our community looked at corporate America as, if not the savior on the white horse, at least the sanity world of like, well, you have to hire the best, you got to do these programs. And now with the right and their, don't say gay, book banning, Moms for Liberty, all the PTA stuff going on, all this pushback, drag queen story hours, book banning. And now you have this, I guess he was a candidate for a Tennessee Senate or something, this Robbie Starbuck, who didn't win
Yeah.
election, but now he's doing stuff on his podcast. and that's fine. But to me, as a consumer, I think of John Deere in a certain way. I think of them as being a premier manufacturer of farming equipment and lawnmowers.
Right. And the iconic green and yellow.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very iconic.
We have a Tractor Supply up by us. We go to infrequently, but we do shop there now and then for specific things. I'm not sure that my needs as a consumer, which were being met by either company, really were impacted by their corporate policies. And I don't think that this trickles down to how they treat their customers either. So it's sort of like this weird bogeyman war on wokeness, if that's what they want to call it, right?
Yeah, and this Robbie Starshak, as you said, he lost his election, or Starbuck. I keep saying Starshak. So yeah, where he lost his race, now he's this turned into this rabid activist,
culture warrior.
Wants to go after one company after another. He had success with Tractor Supply, and now he's apparently got success going after John Deere, and who knows who's next. This also goes to me, and you and I have said this with our consulting business with Triberry, is you have to be careful who you respond to and how you respond. Because this to me appears to be a knee-jerk reaction. What he does or what he says in terms of John Deere doing whatever he feels exercised about in terms of diversity and inclusion probably is not going to affect any of the business. As you said, it's a very specialized piece of sophisticated equipment that you're purchasing. And so whether they have a women's resource group or a veterans resource group or an African-American resource group or LGBTQ resource group, as you said, it's usually for mentoring, for leadership, those sort of issues, and
best
helps
talent,
with, right, and helps with the internal morale at the company.
And
but
to your point from last week, you brought up this Tim did this thing with math that I just love when he does this. He did the research on Tractor Supply Company's overall marketing budget, like they don't ever release this, but you could figure out what they spend on their media buys, et cetera. And you figured out that their DEI or their initiatives for like cultural stuff was was it like 1% of their entire marketing budget?
Or like
it was like 536,000, some insanely
of their
small
98
number.
million. Yeah, of 98 million, and that included women,
veterans, women,
people with disabilities. I mean, it was a huge
big
chunk
swath, for $536,000,
which is nothing. Nothing.
What does a 30-second commercials cost on the last year's Super Bowl?
Oh God, it was $7 million, I think.
So yeah, all right. So right off the bat, so what this guy is doing with these suggesting these boycotts and stuff, is his claim, and they do this. They play this game of using words and logic that almost sounds right. That you don't want this company spending their hard-earned dollars in this area,
right?
But when you really look at the dollars they're spending, they probably spend more on copy or paper and coffee the entire year for their company than they do on these efforts. So for Tim and me, I think we just see this as another veiled way of advancing their cultural warrior point of view, which is no LGBTQ, no trans, no this, no that. A couple other people get swept up in it, but they veil it now because it's starting to sound a little, well, do we really want these people? I don't know.
The other thing that shocked me in this article is they talked about so Microsoft, they talked about Google, Meta, Zoom. They've all kind of either eliminated or they've
scaled back
their programs. But they said that Microsoft spent $150 million on DEI programs and mandating training on racial allyship. And I thought to myself, that's a contract we missed. $150 million is outrageous. I mean, I don't know what they could have possibly spent $150 million on.
Tim,
I would love to have seen that breakout of where that money went for DEI in terms of recruiting and
Look, I highlighted that as well, and I was like, they could have spent $1 million, right? And that still sounds like a lot, but
yeah.
But of course, again, the way Microsoft looked at this, back the E out of it for a minute, they're looking at diversity and inclusion. They are pretty much a worldwide company at this point. They're most of their business is based in the U.S., or at least their management teams and but they do operate in many other countries. And so, you have to scale that up and say, okay, if they're worried about their talent pool in the U.S. and how to make the company more appealing to smart people or the people they want to work with, they have to do that in every other country. So maybe that number is not so crazy, but that is actually, that number you put up, it could be the revenue for a small company, right?
Oh my God, it'd be huge.
Yeah.
The other thing that John Deere had said, and you and I have talked to a number of larger companies where this has become an issue and more of a cost issue or a business case issue. So they said, so this is John Deere's statement again about them backing off of DEI. Reaffirming within the business that the existence of diversity quotas and pronoun identification has never been and are not company policy. So we had talked about how people put their pronouns in he, she, they, them. And there's many companies that haven't done it just because when they looked at the cost of actually redoing 400,000 business cards or whatever that would be to do all this. And as a needed basis, if you were replenishing something, it's certainly something to look at. What I didn't think of, and we had a listener that contacted us, and it made sense to me. He had said he'd heard us talking about the pronoun issue, and he said, "Well, I don't disagree with you guys." He said, "I work for a multinational company, and there are many times where there will be names that pop up from someone in Indonesia or someplace that I'm not familiar with, and don't know if the name is a female or male name, or how it should be."
That's actually a great point. That's a great point.
I thought so too. So it'd be this. I'll be very basic here. In the U.S., it could be Pat Smith. Well, is Pat Smith a man or a woman, right? So he said in those cases, it's been very helpful for him to see that, okay, I'm going to be dealing with it's a she or it's now. But
what a logical. That comment from the listener, what a logical and smart, simple thing that totally destigmatizes it and makes it a useful tool to make sure that you're communicating correctly with a coworker or a partner, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't go into the gender affirming and all the other things that go with it. So it's you and I have talked about how we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth over our years, particularly in the work we've done within this space. And this, to me, seems to be 4 or 5 years ago, it swung way over to everybody was hiring these DEI experts and people within staffing. And now it seems to be swinging back the other way, or it's going back to the human resources departments as part of their overall role in terms of recruiting, right? Or in terms of the recruiting and so forth. So we'll see what happens. It's I don't know. It's an odd time we're in, as we mentioned on our podcast with Joe Biden stepping aside, and we'll see how this election's going to be. As somebody called it, it's not going to be it'll be a street fight between the two parties.
Between when we did Unbuttoned and our show today, I read a couple of interesting articles, one in the Atlantic and one in Slate, and they both were like, the crowning of the Republican nominee as the next president is a little bit premature.
Yeah.
Given the ripples and the contours of this election season, how charged it is and how everything's a new surprise or something, he's measuring the curtains already. And I'm not so sure that, given that when people become reacquainted with the positions of that party, I don't know. We'll see. I don't have an inevitability about any of it, but it's certainly one of the most curious that we've experienced as adults, right?
Hey, listen, as it was when Hillary Clinton was running, people hated Hillary Clinton, and I used to say, it's not so much Hillary Clinton as to what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And we've seen what's happened with the Supreme Court by not voting for Hillary Clinton because people might have been mad about Bernie, who wasn't a Democrat, by the way.
He was, that's right.
So people upset that they supported Hillary, but it got us the Supreme Court we have. And if the Republicans get in again and they say probably 2 more Supreme Court justices. If you think we're losing rights now and women have less rights now than they did 25, 30, 50 years ago.
50, yeah, over 50 years ago.
Yeah, wait until two more conservatives get in there, if they get in. And I don't know why people don't understand that. But
it's such a curious thing, Tim, isn't it? And we also have a cult of personality. Like, in some countries, they don't really care about the personality. They care about what they're going to do. Like, are they going to do a good job? Can they? Here it is basically like a Hollywood contest. Who looks best? Who's strongest? Who's going to do something?
They asked somebody what they thought of the Republican convention, and I laughed at it. It was somewhere I was reading a blog. The guy said, he goes, I could see now how it's not so tough to get a bunch of people to drink lemonade and die out in the jungle.
Jim Jones cult.
Yeah. He equated it to that. He goes, I often wondered how people would just be so naive and just sit around and all drink Kool-Aid and die. He goes, I get it now. And he just left it at that.
Yeah, I didn't watch too much of it. Did you?
Oh, yeah. No, I had it on nonstop.
Oh, you had it on. Okay. I was very.
Oh, yeah. Hulk Hogan ripped his shirt off. What's her name? Carrie Lake went off the rails. Did you see Matt Gaetz? They said it looked like he had a.
Oh, my God. I saw the pictures.
Looks like Liberace and Donny
They had it
Osmond
before
had a
and
baby.
after. They said whoever did his Botox went way over.
Oh, his Botox and his makeup, they're equating to Beavis Butthead. Somebody said, one of the Republicans who hates him says he looked like a blow-up sex doll.
I also did see him kind of badger Kevin McCarthy while he was giving an interview, and and someone was like, "Just get away," you're just.
Yeah, the guy called him an asshole. So get back, go away.
So, but I suppose that our culture, we like this I don't like my politics like this. I don't think it's a blood sport. I think there's a lot of complex issues that need a lot of attention and a lot of back and forth and compromise. Listen to me, right? But
there was some guy, just before I forget, I should post the video, but he was dressed like Uncle Sam. And Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene were together thinking that I think this guy was going to be positive. So he comes, can I have a picture? Can I have a picture? So he's in the middle of it, and he puts his arm around her, and he goes, everybody thinks he's looking at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Everybody thinks you're really crazy, really nuts. I don't think you're really that crazy. And you're not a pedophile. You don't appear to be a pedophile. And then they're trying to get rid of the guy because the cameras are going click, 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 click. And then she's got this look on her face. He's trying to push him away, and security comes and removes the guy. But it was hilarious. He's sitting there. Wow. You don't look crazy to me. You don't look like a pedophile. So there you go.
There you go, folks. The week that was and the weeks to come. So we're going to wrap it up there. We want to thank you for joining us today on the Focus Group. FocusGroupRadio.com is our website. You'll learn about us there, including our partners, Deep Discount being one of them. We visited with them earlier in the show, and they have a sale this month. The name's in the title. I picked a new documentary that came out at the end of last year. It's called Remembering Gene Wilder. Tim picked Misery, a wonderful movie starring Kathy Bates, based on a Stephen King novel. And the new movie this week, the new release, is Back to Black. It's the story of Amy Winehouse as portrayed by Marissa Abella. FocusGroupRadio.com again. Click on the Deep Discount logo. Start your shopping extravaganza. I'd like to remind everybody, boy, oh boy, did I have a fun drive the other day with someone going right onto the rumble strip and almost into the guardrail before they looked up. I mean, this is the thing. I'm like trying to get away, and they look up, and I'm like, you're looking at a phone. So don't text and drive, arrive alive. We would like you to be here for us to entertain you next week. So have a good one, folks, and we'll see you then.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.